Welcome back to the deep dive. We're here again to plunge into these fascinating stories and really pull out those insights that help you make sense of things.
Exactly.
Today, we've got a really captivating journey, I think. It all starts with, believe it or not, two sharp young kids, Kesser and Steen.
Hmm?
They're students in a nature and innovation class, and they were just exploring their own neighborhood over the summer holiday. And, well, they stumbled onto something pretty unexpected.
And it perfectly sets up what we're diving into, doesn't it?
It really does. It shows how these big, complex questions can just pop up from, the smallest local things you notice.
Yeah, and that's really our focus today. We're going beyond just, oh, they found a rare plant. We want to look at how local biodiversity, the nature right in our backyards, how that intersects and sometimes really clashes with big urban development plans.
Right. That clash.
It forces us, really, to ask some critical questions about planning, about conservation, about what we as communities actually decide is important.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to unpack all the layers here. We'll start with the plant itself, this rare find. Then we'll get into the infrastructure project, the municipal plan that suddenly casts a shadow over it, and then explore those bigger questions this whole situation brings up for all of us about how our towns and cities grow, how they adapt.
It's a great case study, really.
It is. And hey, before we dive right in, if you're enjoying these deep dives, finding them valuable, just take a quick second, hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening. That way you won't miss out on future insights.
Good reminder.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Picture Kesser and Steen. It's their summer vacation.
Right.
Maybe doing little jobs, like helping out at Aunt Grøn's place, But the key thing is, they always had this curiosity. They were always looking.
That quote from Kesser says it all, doesn't it? There is always something we can look at, Steen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That constant observation, just being engaged with what's around them, that's what kicked this whole thing off.
It's powerful, isn't it? Just everyday observation. So one day, they're out, and their sharp eyes spot this plant, something they just don't recognize.
And Steen, he's got some botanical knowledge already, right? His first thought was maybe it's that rare agar covade they talked about in class.
Yeah, but he quickly realized, hang on, the leaves aren't right. This plant, it didn't have those violet leaves.
So not that one. Something else. Something genuinely unusual for them.
Definitely.
And what I find really remarkable is what they did next. Their immediate reaction. These two, fresh from this nature and innovation class.
Young citizen scientists in the making.
Totally. They didn't just shrug and walk on. They knew somehow that documenting this was important.
Phones out, taking pictures.
Exactly. Photos first.
Yeah.
Then they made a plan. Ask Professor Mr. Hendricks or, maybe the man in the green shirt at the Garden Center nursery. Someone they knew actually knows about plants.
And that's not just a cute story, is it? That's citizen science happening right there. Not just a hobby, but like a vital way we monitor our environment.
Yeah.
Often goes unnoticed.
For sure. And their effort, their follow-through, it paid off. Big time.
Huge. Their discovery, it turned out to be the Narrow-Leaved Rattle, Stor skjaller in Danish.
And the significance, why is this such a big deal?
Okay, get this. Their find, the one they photographed and documented, is now the only officially documented specimen of this plant in the entire municipality.
Wow. The only one.
The only verified one. Now, there are apparently some other recent reports, but they haven't been officially approved yet. And any older records, well, they lack the photo proof.
So Kesser and Steen's discovery is unique. It holds real ecological weight for their local area because it's documented, it's verified.
Precisely. It's solid evidence.
Okay, so let's get into this plant then. This Stor skjaller, scientific name Rhinanthus angustifolius, or sometimes Rhinanthus serotinus.
Right.
It's an annual plant, lives its whole cycle in 1 year, sprouts, flowers, seeds, then dies off.
Flowers are pale yellow. You'd see them sort of May through August typically.
Sounds quite delicate, maybe unassuming. But its biology is actually fascinating.
Oh, it really is. It's got this secret, you could say. It's a hemiparasite.
Hemiparasite. Okay, break that down.
Right, so it belongs to the brimrate family. Hemi means half. So it's partly parasitic. It targets other plants, especially grasses. Its roots actually penetrate the roots of those grasses.
Seriously, they tap into the other plant's roots.
Yeah, to draw out water, mineral nutrients, even some organic stuff. It's not a full parasite, mind you. It still has green leaves, does its own photosynthesis.
Oh, okay.
But it definitely relies on its grassy neighbors for a big chunk of its resources. Gives it a real advantage in certain soils.
And this parasitic nature, this snootin, as they call it, that's important, isn't it?
Yeah.
Historically.
Very important. Farmers knew about this for centuries. They noticed that where this plant grew, their grain harvest, their hay yield, would actually decrease noticeably.
Ah, because it was stealing resources from the valuable grasses?
Exactly. So naturally, it became undesirable in agriculture. Farmers actively tried to get rid of it. They selected it out of the operation through tilling, fertilizers, and just managing fields differently.
Which explains why it's rare now.
That's a huge part of it. Its habitat got squeezed. It needs specific conditions, slightly chalky, nutrient-poor soil, lots of sun, or just light shade. You find it now in places that haven't been heavily farmed or developed.
Like meadows, maybe salt marshes, dune slacks, moist heathland, places that are a bit more natural, less disturbed.
Precisely those kinds of places. And that brings us to the absolute crucial point here.
Okay.
Why this plant really matters,
Right.
beyond just being rare. The narrow-leaved rattle is considered an indicator species,
Indicator species.
meaning
Thanks.
its presence tells you something very specific and important about the health of the ecosystem it's in. If you find Stor skjaller thriving, it's a really strong sign that you're looking at a successful, established natural area with high biodiversity.
Wow, so it's like a little flag saying, this place is ecologically valuable.
Exactly. It suggests an intact, healthy system, probably one that's escaped heavy human pressure. It tells you the area supports a good range of life, that there's a delicate balance still working.
That makes Kesser and Steen's find incredibly important then. Not just the plant, but what it represents about that whole patch of land.
Immense value. It changes how you have to look at that area.
And even the name is interesting, right? Rhinanthus?
Yeah, it comes from ancient Greek. Rhinos for nose and anthos for flower.
Nose flower, why?
If you look closely at the flower, the upper part, the labellum, it's got this distinct hooked shape. Looks a bit like a nose, I suppose.
Ah, okay, I can picture that. And the rattle part.
That's practical history right there.
Right.
When the seeds were ripe and dry inside the seed capsule, they'd rattle. And that sound was apparently a traditional signal for farmers. It meant the hay was ready, time to start the harvest.
That's amazing. So it's tied into agricultural rhythms, too. And there are different variations.
Just briefly, yeah.
Yeah.
There's var vunalis, which is the slightly more common one you might encounter, and then var apteris, which is apparently much harder to find.
So this plant isn't just biologically interesting, it's culturally embedded, too. Marking seasons, influencing farming.
Absolutely. Deep roots, you could say, in more ways than one. And its decline really mirrors changes in our landscape due to human activity.
Makes the rediscovery by these kids even more poignant, maybe? A reminder of what's been lost, but also what might still be there to protect.
Well said. It frames the next part of the story perfectly.
Right, because here's where things get complicated. This botanical discovery suddenly runs up against, well, plans.
The flash.
Remember, Kesser and Steen found this rare plant right in their local patch, while Kesser suddenly recalls hearing Oma and Aunt Grøn talking about something.
Something about that specific area.
Exactly. Turns out the very spot where they found the Stor skjaller has been discussed by the City Council's Economic Committee.
Ah, and not because of the plant, I presume.
No, not at all. It's about infrastructure. There's a proposed project. They're looking for funding to finance something called a local rainwater diversion project, an LAR project.
LER projects, okay, we see those a lot now. Local flooding of regband, right? Basically ways to manage stormwater runoff in urban areas.
Yeah, the idea seems to be to channel rainwater from the roads in that specific area, like building a sort of canal system, maybe.
Could be open channels, could be underground pipes, depends on the specifics. But yeah, managing rainwater, especially with heavier downpours due to climate change and all the hard surfaces in cities, that's a real challenge.
But here's the thing that immediately jumped out at Steen. The vagueness of it all.
How so?
He apparently just blurted out something like, "But for God's sake, Kesser, my dad says, how can they possibly know what this project costs if they don't even know what they actually want to build yet?"
Ooh, sharp point from Steen and his dad.
Right. Kesser immediately agreed, worried they'd just end up with some kind of half-bad solution.
That's a really astute observation. It cuts right to a common problem in big projects, doesn't it? Seeking funding, setting budgets before the actual design, and, crucially, the environmental impacts are fully understood.
It feels backwards.
It can be.
Yeah.
It puts the financials ahead of the environmental blueprint, which is risky. Risky for nature and risky for public trust, too.
And Steen's worries weren't just about the money or the planning process. He was thinking about the ground itself.
The environmental impact.
Yeah, he pictured huge excavators rolling in, just tearing up the whole area. And he immediately thought, what happens to the rare plants? They're Stor skjaller.
And not just the plants.
No. He mentioned other wildlife, too. Sand lizards, Mark Furbin, and natterjack toads, Strandtudsern, other vulnerable species known to be in or near those kinds of habitats.
Fragile ecosystems, the kind of places that heavy machinery doesn't mix well. His image of Oma's tea almost bubbling over from the anxiety that captures the feeling perfectly.
It really does, and it shows these kids aren't just finding plants, they're thinking ecologically, they're connecting the dots. They'd even apparently talked about different types of LAR solutions themselves.
Interesting. So they were already thinking about alternatives.
Seems like it, which hints that, there are likely different ways to manage rainwater. It's not always just big pipes and channels.
No, absolutely not. You've got options like permeable pavements, rain gardens, green roofs, swales, more nature-based solutions that can sometimes be integrated. The question is, are those options even on the table here? Have they been properly evaluated?
And that leads to another fascinating bit of digging Kesser and Steen did.
Oh, more citizen science.
You could say citizen research. They actually found out that one of Denmark's leading experts on this exact topic, LAR projects, leads a group that wrote a huge detailed report about it.
Uh-huh. So the expert knowledge is out there.
It exists. A long, comprehensive report. This suggests that the deep thinking, the best practices, the understanding of environmental impacts, maybe even guidance on how to handle discoveries like theirs, it's available.
Which then raises the million-dollar question, doesn't it?
Right.
Why isn't that deep knowledge seemingly being used before funding is sought and plans, however vague, are being discussed by committees? Especially now, with a confirmed rare indicator species found right there.
Exactly. That report probably covers all sorts of crucial details. Best practices, impact assessments, maybe even those alternative, greener approaches to managing rainwater.
You'd hope so. It makes the lack of detail in the current proposal even more concerning.
So this takes us from the specific story of Kesser and Steen right into these much bigger questions, doesn't it? Questions for the whole community.
It really does. It crystallizes a tension lots of places are grappling with. You've got this rare indicator species, proof of valuable biodiversity found in an area. And that same area is targeted for infrastructure development. So how do you prioritize? What wins? Immediate engineering solutions for, say, flood prevention, or protecting the long-term health of local ecosystems.
And what responsibility does the City Council have to really dig into the environmental impact, especially when, like Steen pointed out, the plans seem fuzzy?
Right. How thorough does that assessment need to be? Can you even do a proper assessment if you don't know exactly what's being built or how?
It seems impossible, which brings us back to Kesser and Steen.
Citizen science. How do we make sure discoveries like theirs, important finds by regular people, by kids, actually get fed into the planning process?
Yeah, how do we integrate that local knowledge before the excavators are ordered and it's too late? What systems need to be in place for that?
It's a huge challenge.
So think about this. What does it really signal when the cost of a project seems to be defined before the design or the environmental checks are done?
It signals a potential problem with priorities, perhaps, or maybe just a flawed process.
What are the consequences, though? Not just for the lizards and the plants, but for, public trust, for transparency, for whether the final solution is genuinely sustainable.
These are fundamental questions about how we manage our shared spaces. It goes way beyond just this one plant or this one project.
It forces us to weigh things up, the economic drivers versus the ecological needs. What does a truly sustainable solution for rainwater actually look like?
Is it just the cheapest way to get water from A to B? Or is it something more integrated, something that manages water and protects, maybe even enhances, the natural value of the area, recognizing that biodiversity itself provides services?
It's a complex balance. So we've gone from two curious kids on a summer walk
That amazing observation.
to a really complex municipal challenge, one that forces us all to question our priorities, maybe even what we mean by progress.
It absolutely highlights the power of just paying attention and the critical role anyone, including young people like Kesser and Steen, can play in bringing vital environmental issues into the light, issues that might otherwise get overlooked by decision makers.
Their story is, it's a real case for citizen engagement, isn't it?
Absolutely powerful one.
So we'll leave you with this thought to mull over. What's our collective responsibility as a society when we find precious natural heritage right in the path of what looks like progress or necessary infrastructure?
How do we build processes that genuinely ensure local knowledge, citizen discoveries, and biodiversity are always part of the equation when we plan our shared future?
And maybe ask yourself, What steps could you take to find out about similar situations in your own community? How can you ensure that development happens thoughtfully, with a balance between human needs and the natural world?